So last week, what we were looking at, and I was wanting you to be able to not just have me tell you, but so we were doing this as an interactive because each one of us are supposed to be prepared. And so we looked at a number of things. Last week we were looking at, well, what about evolution, right? Because that's one of the topics that really strikes at the heart of, did God create the heaven and the earth? And if you believe that God didn't create the heaven and earth, well, then you have a serious problem with, of course, the first chapters of Genesis, and really you have a problem with a lot of parts of the Bible, right? Because Romans, 1 John, all the scriptures that say that Jesus created, the Holy Spirit created, and God created. So, fundamental issue. And we were talking last week about the fact that the theory of evolution, while it's held out there as basically the only thing that you can reasonably believe in, that actually the theory of evolution has serious problems. And in fact, most of Darwin's original belief has been totally discredited. There are no more Darwinists. Now there are neo-Darwinists because all of the original theories are so badly flawed. So we looked at what some of the flaws were. Now, of course, they don't teach you this in school. And we looked at the fact that underlying the evolutionary construct, there is a philosophical presupposition. And that is what? Can anybody tell me what is the underlying assumption that people who believe in evolution today have?
That there's no spiritual things outside of matter, that the only thing that exists is material, physical world.
Right.
And there can't be a God or any spiritual phenomena happening.
Right. So it is a materialistic presupposition. And as Carl Sagan used to say, the universe, all that is, all that ever was, all that ever will be. In that kind of a statement, there's a presupposition that all that exists is what is material, the things that you can touch, the things that you can measure. And I was talking about this with some of the young kids in oops, getting ahead of myself here. So we were talking about this, and so part of the presupposition, and let me ask you this, can a scientist prove that all that exists is matter? Can you prove that? Can anybody prove that?
Nope.
No. Unless they're the ones that created all of it, which is not true.
Well, it's similar to proving, can I prove 100% that God exists?
No.
No,
Science.
not 100%. Can I, so let me ask you this question, and this one threw off some of the junior high kids. So I asked, can I prove 100% that George Washington existed? No. You know that you cannot prove that George Washington existed?
You mean like 100% certainty, right? I mean,
How can you tell me? Because what is the scientific method?
hypothesis,
Can't observe it.
testing.
Yeah, you have to observe it and
observation.
be able to test it. Can you observe that George Washington is in fact in existence?
We have the history, isn't it?
We have history, but how do you know that history is valid?
Do we have his bones or anything?
But how do you know those bones were George Washington's bones, even if we have his bones? Now of course, the way that you can discover, because you can't prove it 100% one way or the other, you do what courts do today. So for instance, when somebody commits a crime, it is almost never the case that you can 100% prove that that person committed a crime and they're alive, right?
Yeah.
And so what do? You look at evidence. And this is the way you have to measure anything that's happened in history. Do you know that Shakespeare, do you believe Shakespeare was a person?
Yes.
Do you know that academics right now challenge that and are not certain? In fact, there was a movie out recently, kind of the popularized version of that. Maybe Shakespeare didn't even exist. Right? So the only way that you can tell something that's not repeatable is you look at evidence. Because you can't actually apply the scientific method. What you have to apply is the historical and evidentiary method. Okay? Those are two different things. Okay? So that's just one statement. Not only that, but it's not physically possible to make the statement and be able to prove it that all that exists is matter. That happens to be a philosophical view of reality. You can't prove it because by definition the other things that would exist wouldn't be measurable by the science. You can't touch them. But let me ask you the question. Does love exist?
Yes.
Does beauty exist?
Yes.
Do you have a free will?
Yes.
I think so.
Well, let me tell you that if you believe in a materialist presupposition that all that there is material, then your answer to all of those is no. Love is just a construct. There is no love. All that is the things going on inside your brain. And in fact, you don't even have a free will. You know that? Because all that you can do is follow the pre-programming that's a part of your genes and a part of your DNA. And so you don't have a free will. You don't have a free choice. There is no right or wrong. All of those are the outcomes of having a philosophical viewpoint that there is only material. The thing is that nobody can live, nobody here and nobody anywhere can live with the assumption that I don't have a free will. because each of you and myself have an experience that I can choose what I want to choose. And somehow to say that I can't doesn't seem to ring right. And also the fact that we believe that deep down there are things that are wrong. Like we truly believe that murder is wrong. What Hitler did, and Stalin, and Pol Pot, and many who have mass murderers, or even somebody who murders somebody, we believe that that's wrong. But if you have a materialist presupposition, you can't say that that's wrong. That just is. There is no right or wrong. But deep down inside of us, we know that if somebody were to rape and abuse and hurt ourselves or somebody we love, we know that that is wrong. And we cannot actually live. And so most people who say, I believe that there is only material, they don't actually live that way. Because the implications of that lead really to depression and despair and hopelessness. And it doesn't jive with what we experience in day-to-day life. It creates a tension. So it's important to note that in the scientific arena, that this base assumption of materialism, first of all, is not a scientific statement. It is a philosophical viewpoint on what exists that cannot be proved. And it's not the only philosophical viewpoint that you can do science from. In fact, most science has been done by people who had an assumption that God exists. So, Pascal, René Descartes, Galileo. You can go through, and everybody basically up until the 1900s, and still today, I went to UC Berkeley, and a lot of people assume that that is a very atheistic and liberal school, which it is to a degree. But I had a physics professor. There's a lot of Nobel laureate physics professors and chemistry professors there. This guy stood up and he explained to the class, this was in a quantum physics class, and at the end of the class he said that he is a Chinese man, and he grew up as an atheist, and he did not believe in God. But as he studied physics, and then when he was looking at the Big Bang, he came to recognize that the universe had to have had a beginning. That is the whole fundamental statement of the Big Bang, is that at some point all that was in one singularity, and there was no universe before that point. It was this point. And something, and it was just staying there, and then suddenly it banged. It exploded. But the fact that it exploded defies the laws of physics that we know about. It wouldn't just randomly explode. There had to be something that caused that to happen. So he started to think, well, if something caused the Big Bang, what could that be? It had to be something that was outside of the universe, right? Because the universe didn't exist. It had to be something that could make a choice of doing this. So it had to be a being with intelligence. It was outside of universe. It had the ability to make a choice and to start this process of the Big Bang. What could that be? What could that be? And as he pondered and studied, he then realized there had to be something like what we would call a God. Something outside of the universe, something that has intelligence, can make decisions, and not only that, has the power to start this all in motion. And then as he studied religions, and he came upon Christianity, and he found the answer, and he gave his life to Jesus Christ. And he said that because of the Big Bang, as I studied that, I became a Christian. This was an atheist physics professor who's still doing physics research at UC Berkeley. Does he have the presupposition that all that there is material? No. Because he recognized that the evidence, the scientific evidence, points to the fact that there has to be something else that started this. That's what the scientific evidence shows. So the statement that all that there is material does not fit with the evidence. Okay? So, we looked last week at what some of the weaknesses are in the Darwinian theory. So, who can tell me what some of the weaknesses are?
Like the evidence that they use in support of evolution, like the findings of skeletons or moths on trees, or things that supposedly prove that species, changed and evolved, have all been disproven. And
okay, well, don't overstate things. So what we said is that there are a number of examples that they use that are false.
Yeah.
And they're still teaching them in classrooms.
Yes.
Okay? So we looked, for instance, at, you said the spotted moths.
Yes.
So that's something my son had it in his biology textbook. Turns out moths don't sit on the tree bark. And, even back then, the guy who did it admitted that he glued dead moths onto the tree bark and took pictures. Okay? The question is, why do they still have that in the textbooks? Well, they say because it's useful, it's easy to understand, and it's useful to teach a point. Well, my question is, don't they have any better examples that are real? I mean, I know they exist because there's two types of evolution, okay? There is macroevolution, which is what?
Changing from one species to another.
Yeah, changing from one species to another. And there is microevolution, which is changes what? Within a species. We call it adaptation. So we know that adaptation does happen. So why would they throw out examples that are known to be faked? Like that one with the moths. Say, come on, at least use one that's real, right? So what's another one of the things that's in textbooks that was flawed, and they still teach it in textbooks.
Haeckel's embryos.
Haeckel's embryos, okay? A long discredited theory that embryos go through the various stages of evolution. So a human embryo starts out as like a fish and then becomes a bird. It's like, hey, that doesn't happen. And not only that, but the sketches that he used were faked. He used the same image, the block image for the one, and copied it onto the human one too. It's like, okay. So it's a discredited theory and a discredited concept, but it still comes up in discussions. So it comes up occasionally on the abortion debate. People will say, well, after all, a baby, when it was in the womb, it's no different than a fish or a bird. Like, what? No. That embryo, from the time that it's a single cell, and when it starts multiplying, it's always been 100% human, 100% human DNA. It's never had any other DNA. It's always been a human. It's never been anything else. So that's just totally bogus. Okay, what else?
Wasn't there like a Miller-Urey experiment thing?
Yeah, so the Miller
The
experiment.
wrong gas composition.
Yeah, so they were looking for the origins of life. And I've actually got a diagram here. Let me scroll back and find it. Oh, went too far. There we go. The origins of life. So here was the experiment. Methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen put into some sort of a, I don't know what you call that thing. Anybody here have a name for what that top one is? Some sort of a flask. I don't know. At any rate, they had electrodes, the gas is in there, and the mixture, and down at the bottom, after this stuff condensed and cooled, they found amino acids. And all amino acids, that's the building blocks of proteins and DNA. This shows that this could be how life got started, you know. You know, there was the gases, and then there was just a lightning bolt, and they still teach this in your classes. You've probably seen this. The problem with this is, yeah, in fact, they were talking about it at Georgia Tech back when I was talking about this. I saw it on, I was reading something and they had it displayed, or maybe one of you told me about it. The problem with this is that they used the wrong mixture, okay? So they went back and determined what would have been the actual gases that were around, because methane and ammonia, you know, that's kind of a complex hydrocarbons, caustic fumes, kind of not stuff you'd want to have floating around. And not only that, there's no trace of that anywhere, like when they do core drills into the glaciers or anywhere where they find trapped gases. The best that they can assume that what was actually there was probably carbon dioxide and nitrogen. That is the base understanding of people who study the early history. And so carbon dioxide and nitrogen, you put that into the flask and you pass electricity through it. And you do get organic compounds. That's the good news. The bad news is that they're formaldehyde and cyanide. So, not exactly beneficial for creating life. right? In fact, if anything was living, that pretty much would kill it off. And not only that, but they've then kept on trying, say, well, let's go back and get the perfect environment, okay? And we'll just keep on shocking with the ammonia and methane and water vapor. And they get amino acids, but they decompose really quickly. And they get some more, but they keep on decomposing, and they don't stick around, and they don't come together. And even when they're trying to make them come together, they don't build into anything. So the question is, well, how would this have happened? How would life have begun on earth? And the common understanding today is what? Ask.
It took a really long time.
What? No, that's not the common understanding. What is the understanding of where life came from on earth?
Oh, it came from somewhere
How did
else.
life generate on earth?
Aliens.
Yeah, there is no known current mechanism. In fact, they don't believe that life started on earth because there was no way that they understand how it could happen. So I went to a seminar when I was at UC Berkeley on the origins of life. This is definitely not a Christian symposium. And they were discussing this topic, and this was back in the Stone Age when I was still in school. So things have changed since then. But no, but what was that? Back in '89. Whew, long time ago. At any rate, the finding and the current belief at that time, which actually hasn't changed much, is that life did not start on Earth. It had to come, they think, well, maybe it must, because life is here, and it doesn't seem to have begun on Earth, it must have come from outer space. So they're pushing back the problem and hoping that somewhere out there in an unknown place, maybe there was methane and ammonia and some unknown mechanism or something happened. They don't know what, but they're hoping. Okay, so there is no known, and in fact, I was shocked that they actually proposed that aliens brought life to Earth. Okay? So let me ask this question. How much evidence is there for that?
No evidence.
Okay, yeah, that would be a big zero. Okay, so when the question comes, what takes more faith? To believe that God created life on Earth, or to believe that aliens brought life to Earth?
It takes more faith to believe in aliens.
Yeah, there's no evidence for aliens. I've at least got historical evidence for Jesus Christ, who is God. Claimed to be God, proved it. So, and all of this stuff in the Bible actually aligns with the evidence that we see. So, anyhow, just a thought. So, the one problem, so there is no known mechanism of the beginnings of Earth, of life on Earth. There's these old examples that they keep trotting out. What is the biggest, though? There's the hugest problem with the Darwinian evolutionary theory is what?
Fossil record doesn't match the description
The
of
fossil record.
species changing all the time.
Yeah. Right? Because Darwinian evolution says what? How does life form?
Gradually.
Gradually. Small changes over vast periods of time, right? That's what you learn in school. And this is so complex, it just takes ages to happen. We don't see it happening today, so it takes just eons of time. Well, what does the fossil record show?
Booms at one time.
What?
It booms at one time.
Yeah, it booms at one time. What was that time?
Cambrian.
Yeah, the Cambrian era.